Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for attending today. This is the Leaders and Legends podcast featuring notable Oshkosh Greater Fox Cities business personalities and influencers. Today we have Steve Brandes, who's the president of the Wisconsin Herd, which is a Milwaukee Bucks G League affiliate. So without any further ado, Steve, thank you so much for coming on today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, where do we start? How about you tell us a little bit about how does the G League work in the NBA? How does that kind of compare to other different sports franchises? Just for a little background and context information for everybody.
Absolutely. So the G League is basically AAA baseball, as you will, for the basketball world. We are the official minor league for the NBA. Our parent club is the Milwaukee Bucks, and we are an asset on their journey to bring championships to the state of Wisconsin. So they use our team to develop players, find rotational players, injury rehab. But at the same time, it originally was titled the NBA Development League because at the same time, not only are we developing players on the floor, but we're developing business staff and officials and referees and coaches, personnel off the floor. So they're using it as an asset league-wide to develop talent.
Got it. How much, so we asked last week with the Timber Rattlers' Rob Zerjav, and we asked like how much control he has over the actual movement of players. And it sounds like in baseball, very little. It's more of kind of the business operations and creating an environment to develop them. How does that compare to basketball?
Same exact situation. The basketball side for us is controlled by the Milwaukee Bucks. John Horst, the GM. We have our own GM, Tony Bollier, who reports directly into John. So our coaching staff is actually an extension of the Bucks coaching staff. So Chason Allen, our head coach this last season, sat on the coaching staff. So it's an extension, and they do that by design to help the transition of two-way players, the transition of guys being assigned to rehab, to feel like it's the same culture. So it's not being demoted, it's actually you're being assigned and you're transitionally moving over to the same culture.
Well, tell me a little bit about you. Where did your career kind of begin? You know, were you always an athlete? Was that part of your lifestyle? Kind of where did it all begin for you?
Yeah, I mean, I started off as a weekend warrior, as you will, athletes in my own mind in my backyard. Walked on at college, played a couple years at the College of Worcester, blew my knee out, so my career did not flourish as much as I wish it would have. Got into archaeology, so graduated with a degree in archaeology, and I was a professional archaeologist for 2.5 years out of college. Yep, and I did what every archaeologist does: is they transition into professional sports. At least that's what I thought. And so got into the professional sports world after doing a stint of door-to-door sales, and thought I wanted to keep the sport around me. So spent a month at a program called Game Face out of Tualatin, Oregon, and learned sports marketing and learned the skill set of sales and worked for about 7 different teams. Portland International Raceway wasn't a team, but worked with them. Hudson Valley Renegades, Portland Winterhawks, this will date me a little bit, Seattle Supersonics, the LA Avengers. So had a lot of different experience with different teams. And then with that program, they actually, opened up doors for you to interview with different teams. So I was a finalist for a job with the Golden State Warriors. Same time was offered a job with a team in Idaho, part of the Continental Basketball Association, known as the Idaho Stampede. Ultimately didn't get the job in Golden State. Thank goodness, because I won't be sitting here today. Got the job in Idaho, came in as an entry-level water boy, actually entry-level account executive. Worked my way up in every capacity possible, and every job that's on our staff I've done from the 15 years I was there. Year 5, got thrust into the opportunity to be the general manager of the team, and ran the team for 10 years, and then eventually made my way this way.
That's a fascinating story. It seems like you've touched so many different aspects of sports marketing. Reflecting on what it takes to run a successful organization from like a sports marketing standpoint, how does that work? What are the metrics you're looking for, and how do you build those?
Yeah, the biggest thing is quality people. It's not really metric based in the sense of being successful. It's finding quality people. And if you surround yourself with the best people, the highest talent, you're going to be successful. So very fortunate on my journey to be surrounded by a lot of quality people, quality mentors, quality staff. On that journey of finding those people, there are the quantifiable thresholds of that you tied to revenue generation and sales and outbounds and things like that. But it really comes down to being successful in the world of sports marketing, just having a quality infrastructure of humans and having a good human engineering strategy.
How do you go about starting that? How do you go about building that if you're coming into an organization with fresh eyes?
Yeah. I mean, I launched the team here in with the Wisconsin Herd, so started from scratch. So what you do is you start just searching for the best talent out there, and you put your feelers out there. You reach out to your connections. You do all the standard stuff that everybody does to find employees, but you also dig deep and cast a wide net with your own network. I have a pretty wide network of people that are headhunters. So you rely on some of those relationships and those rapport to find the quality talent.
You know, one thing that I've been really impressed with attending various Herd games is the attendance always seems to be a full house. And it sounds like, based on many other aspects of the franchise, that the sales team is unmatched really relative to many other comparative organizations. And you, coming from a sales background, were able to kind of mentor and coach and teach a lot of the younger sales professionals. If you were giving a clinic or a lecture on sales in general, what would that look like? Where would you tell people to focus, and what are the things that make a successful sales professional?
Yeah, I would say my strategy for sales, and I share this with my entire team off and on, is it's called results-centered selling. So we're not selling the tickets per se. We're selling the result of the ticket. We're selling the experience. We're selling how those tickets or how that seat will benefit you. And everybody can benefit from the experience, whether that's quality time with loved ones or, entertaining a client. When clients often, or prospective clients, are getting wooed, you might take them golfing. And you're competing. You don't know, should I win? Should I lose? Or you might take them to dinner or lunch, and you're guarding your space. They're guarding their space, and like you're not really like connecting side by side. But when you're at a game, you're side by side. Their guard is down. You're celebrating together. You're high-fiving them. You're finding that common ground. So it's really selling that result of owning the ticket. It's the experience is one of the big key components of results-centered selling. But to the other part of your question of like, what are you looking for? Like, what makes a successful salesperson is the person's mentality. Like, we have a kid on staff, not even a kid, a very, very strong gentleman by the name of Trevor Kroll. Number one sales guy. He's here in the crowd. Number one sales guy in the league, like ranked 3 of the top 5 verticals of sales because of his mindset. He comes in early, stays late, he grinds. He's not afraid to pick up the phone. He's not afraid to talk to people. He's not afraid to ask questions. When he gets shot down, he doesn't give up. He keeps asking more and more questions. So it's having that mindset of determination, of wanting to be the best. And that I'm kind of the same way of like, I'm not going to settle for I want to keep going. I want to we won franchise of the year this year, but we're going to run it back. We're going to keep growing. We want to make the experience even better going to the next year.
I think that's what you're getting at too, is just like this hunger, this chase, this ambition. And I don't mean to put Trevor on the spot. We got to know Trevor a little bit because he worked out of here for several months when the office was shut down with COVID. And it was cool because he would come in early and all day long he'd be on the phone making calls. And I remember asking him, like, where do you find these leads? Like, where are you finding people to call? And he said, well, I found this this phone book of sorts that had all the coupons for all the different businesses in. And I figured that if someone can pay for an advertisement in the coupon book, they're probably going to be able to pay for some Herd tickets. And he went through that entire book every day and made phone calls, and that was kind of the beginning of his career. And I just thought that was really clever and interesting. And I've learned so much from watching him do that, of such a successful salesperson.
Right. He's such a savvy guy, smart guy, just trying to figure out like how am I going to find leads? Like how am I going to, take my sales numbers to the next level? And he doesn't just work inside the box. He thinks outside the box of how am I going to generate more revenue?
So you mentioned early on in your career, you would do things like door-to-door sales. Well, what was that experience like, and what did that teach you?
It was awesome. Everybody should do it. No, I'm just kidding. It was challenging. The first product I sold was ADT, Security Systems. And their strategy was you had to have khaki shorts, white shoes, and a polo. And you'd have to go knock on the door, and you'd have to walk back like 6 feet because you didn't want to be intimidating. And there was all strategies behind door-to-door. And you would literally pick out a neighborhood, they drop you off, and then you knock on doors and you do one loop of that neighborhood, and then you have your lunch, and then you hit the same doors for another loop. And you would eventually sell them, and you would basically, you were doing the prospecting, and then you would get the quote unquote closer to come in, and then you would get a commission. Very challenging. The second product I sold was pizza coupons. And sure enough, guess what we had to wear doing door-to-door sales?
Khakis, white shoes.
Nope, full-on suit. So I'm selling Papa John's pizza coupons in a full-on suit. And same concept, drop you off in a neighborhood, you walk, do 2 to 3 loops, and you're selling these little coupon books for like $10. And so you're getting a very minimal commission, and you're just grinding. And very challenging, but very smart from a marketing perspective for those companies, because they had this army of humans out in the world knocking on doors, spreading the word, and getting their product into people's hands. So learned a lot of what I didn't want to do, and but also learned just different strategies of zip code, canvassing, things of that nature.
Do you think that would still work today?
I'm sure it probably still exists, honestly.
Yeah.
I think the company was Granton Marketing. I don't know if they're still around, but I'm sure something out there is like that.
I just feel like if someone comes to my door, I'm already on the defense, or I won't answer. And I know
Right.
for sure my wife won't answer.
Right.
So it's like you almost wonder if this is it like a cultural thing that stops working at some point.
Maybe. I don't know. It's been a while.
Yeah. Maybe we could try it out sometime and get some results.
You
Trevor.
can. You can. Trevor and you can.
Yeah, well, Trevor and I will do a little social experiment with it. That's really fascinating. And I imagine that you learn different social cues and like different types of ways to have conversations with clients in the meantime. What are some of those types of tools you've learned from a sales perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. In the process of door-to-door sales, I didn't have water bottles with me. Like I would actually have to ask, hey, do you mind me getting a glass of water? And then they would say, okay, yeah. And then they would run and get me a glass. Nice people out there. But I learned how to get out of my comfort zone. I'm at heart an introvert, but my job makes me an extrovert. So that job really taught me how to be an extrovert and ask questions and put me in a lot of uncomfortable situations. So in our world of sports marketing, when you're selling tickets and you're on the grind, you're calling a bunch of random people, you're going into meetings. It's very awkward and not comfortable when you're first starting out. So once you get over that hump and you realize like you don't care, like I'm like I don't care if somebody tells me no. It just reminds me of my dating life in high school and college. But just I might have some PTSD from all the no's, but you learn how to develop and grow the mindset, because everything is down to your mind. Is like how you're going to approach every day. If you exude positive energy into the universe, you're going to get positive energy back at you. And back to the original thing that I referenced of like your success is based on who you surround yourself with. If you have a bunch of negativity around you, if you have all your friends are complaining, guess what? You're going to complain. If you're positive and everybody's positive and you're celebrating success, and you're going to have this energy that's just positivity, and you're going to be successful.
You mentioned that you teach results-centered sales. How do you teach people to find the results that they're looking for? How do you teach people to overcome different objections in the sales process? And what are some common objections that you've heard over the years and learned how to deal with?
Right. So the first part of results-centered selling is like when you watch a movie or a book, you're going to pick out a book at the bookstore. Like what do you usually typically look at before you pick that book up?
You look at the author, the cover, the back.
Right. So there's the wrapper, there's the description of the book. So that's kind of your hook. When you're going to watch a movie, you see the previews, and that's the hook. Like the biggest hook is Scream. You watch the preview of Scream, you're like, oh, or the first 2 minutes of the movie, like who murdered all these people? So the hook. So when you're in result-centered selling, you're doing what we call benefit statements. So you're tapping the language of the consumer or the prospect that you're talking to. So you're finding out what are the hot buttons of that industry, and then you're tapping their language, and you're lobbing a benefit statement that's real quick and simple that can connect with them in a very quick manner, because you only have so much time to connect with that person. And once you get that benefit statement out, then you can start having the conversation to build the rapport, and then you go into a needs analysis, which could be on the phone or it could be within a meeting setting. But it's really just it's creating that hook to get somebody to want to talk to you.
So are you creating that benefit statement? You're doing a little bit of pre-work before you're even jumping on a call probably, or is this happening live?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So there's generic benefit statements that can apply to all industries, but then the way you talk to a dealership is going to be different than the way you talk to a manager of a Papa John's. They all have different hot buttons, or an accountant would have different hot buttons than auto dealership. So it's really trying to find their language and then pitching in a very short, succinct manner, something that will perk their ears up. Everybody wants to increase revenue. A big hot button or hot topic right now is HR, is people want to hire people. So how can we use tickets to help your company recruit more humans to come work for you? Or how do we increase the quality of life for your experience, for your big corporation that's in our backyard? Through the experiences, or how do we provide diversity, equity, and inclusion in a market that isn't super diverse? So we paint the story, we tell those stories. In regards to the question about objections, it's really just a matter of asking a lot of questions. So almost think of it like peeling back a layer of an onion. You peel it, you can't get to the center. You got to keep going until you get to the center. So when somebody has an objection or a reason why they don't want to purchase, it's really out of the gate isn't the real reason. So you keep asking questions. 90% of the kids and or employees that work for us, they get that no and they're like, okay, thanks, and they hang up and they just give up. But if you keep trying and asking questions, you can get to the real objection. And then once you get to that real objection, you can tailor rebuttals that will actually overcome the objection and then allow them to see opportunities of where they could pull money from. Maybe it's a different budget that they weren't thinking about. Maybe it's they're not the right person to talk to. It's just asking the right questions.
So it sounds like some common objections would be like the price. That's a common objection I think most entry-level salespeople run into.
Right.
And then you would respond with a follow-up question of, well, what is your budget?
Right.
And then that would allow them to provide. They have to give you an answer. So now
they don't have to,
but it's like, well, what is your budget? And then they can
Right.
come down to a lower number.
Right.
And now you're like, well, we could look at this section of seating perhaps, or something like that.
Or you may even ask, like, may I ask where you're pulling your budget from? And so there's a lot of times companies, maybe they're only thinking of they have money for tickets and they spend it all. But there's other companies that will pull money from marketing or from HR. There's a lot of different verticals for budget that if you ask, you might find opportunities that they're not even thinking about.
That's a really creative idea too when you're talking about the staffing problem, is using tickets as a solution to that. And so when as far as the person coming up with what the benefit is, that's going to be the sales professional has to kind of be creative in that way and think outside the box to figure out how are these tickets building kind of camaraderie relationships and things like that going to benefit this specific industry.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Is there a type of person you're looking for? Is there a behavioral characteristic? We mentioned ambition, but it sounds like there's a lot of creativity that's required.
Creativity, ability to communicate, somebody that can communicate in the written word, in the audible, verbally, in their writing, so like hiring managers, when we're looking for people, some really care about a cover letter. Some don't care about a cover letter. I actually care because if you took the time to write a cover letter, that means you're detail oriented and you really care about the opportunity. Now, if you provide a cover letter that says, "Dear Cleveland Browns," you're out. I'm not talking to you because you didn't take the time to actually tailor it to who we are. So it's just a mindset of finding people that have that determination, ambition, want a career, not just a job, that are good orators, that can speak, that can communicate. Teamwork, is huge. So athletes are prime candidates because they have to deal with teamwork situations. Military people, those individuals have been put through a lot of pressure. So being able to think on your feet is a huge task or I guess skill set that we look for. Yeah.
When you're trying to kind of build your team, and not just in the sales force, but kind of all around, where do you look for as far as like a balance of different strengths and weaknesses? How do you go about trying to put that together?
Yeah, it's really finding people that meet the qualities you're looking for, and then you bring them in, and then you kind of work with them and develop them. And sometimes you get somebody in and you think that they're going to be a square peg for the square hole, but they're not. You're trying to put them in a different hole, if that makes sense, that old cliche.
Yeah.
And you work with them, and if the timing's right, you can actually find opportunities for them to develop and grow into a different path. So historically, like for us, we've had some staff that have come in sales-wise, and then they move on to different levels of job. And that's not even just us. It's like you look at the Milwaukee Bucks, you have Dave Dean, who's one of the highest level persons within the basketball operations for the Bucks, came in as a PR intern. And he's now like the VP of player personnel for the Bucks. And it's because he just didn't fit in that role or didn't want to be in that role, but had this desire, this burning desire to have a career in the basketball ops side. So somebody identified that and then gave him the shot, and he ran with it, and he's excelling now on that side. So it's really, you bring strong people in, you identify what they're good at, and then you try to tailor opportunities for them. It may not happen overnight because, we're a very small staff, but there's opportunities to slide people into roles and develop them and grow them.
I see a lot of companies that have a proclivity to focus on weakness and developing weaknesses, which is, I think, there's a place for that, but then there's also this idea of building. You can't build unless you're building on your strengths. What ratio would you look at, or how would you go about trying to figure out where to put the energy?
Yeah, I think obviously a lot of it is dictated by our business model and where we're at, and like, do we have a position that's open? So like, for example, we might have, I don't know, maybe our PR role is open and we identify somebody on staff, or maybe it's an intern on staff, and maybe they're really good at something else, but we're like, wow, this person has the skills that could come into. I don't think we're creating a ratio. It's more of like, how do their skills match up with the actual position that we're looking to fill them in?
I want to talk a little bit too about setting a vision, like thinking strategically. I think a lot of people in the community find you as kind of a leader when it comes to thinking about the future and how that's communicated throughout an organization, how you realize that. Where do you start when it comes to strategic planning and thinking about strategy?
Right. So we are very overly communicative within our organization. So we have a board called a visual management board. And so every department vertical of our business, so whether that's public relations, marketing, ticketing, sponsorship sales, game production, they're on that board. All their projects, they write on the board and they share. So not only do the managers of those departments have access to that, but it's in a public setting for our entire team to see. So then our entire team constantly has the ability to challenge, to ask questions, to say, hey, where are we at on this project that we haven't talked about in a while? But the idea is to overly communicate. So that's a visual tool that we use. And then we also—
Is this like a physical board, or is this like a software or something?
Physical board,
okay.
Just Sharpie Expo type,
Sure,
not Sharpie, but Expo, that'd be bad.
Yeah.
But
we're not changing the plan.
yeah, I guess we're doing that forever. But then we also have a thing called Herd Highlights. So every department lead is required to send like an update at the end of the week of, hey, this is what we've accomplished. That's then aggregated, that's shipped up to Milwaukee so that they're on the same page of what's happening. We have, you talked about weaknesses. Many people are familiar with what a SWOT analysis is,
Yep.
right? So we don't do those. We do what we call a SOAR. And a SOAR is when you focus on the positives. So it's strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results. So the weaknesses in a SWOT are gone. You're looking at everything as an opportunity. So we get together as a retreat. We talk about what did we do well. We look at what can we grow to get better. And then what do we aspire to be? And then what are actionable items to have results? So that's like one of our year-end strategic planning initiatives we do. What we're in the second phase of is actual strategic planning. So every department then has a template of like, here's our strategic plan for my department, and I'm going to start building it out. And then they're going to come together and we're going to talk through it as a group. And then ultimately we'll have a big document that's almost 100 pages, as you will, of different strategies. And it's everything from every department. And then they share that to the entire team. Another process we do is SOPs, standard operating procedures. We create flow charts, so process and protocols of beginning to end of every process. So each department leader is tasked with the responsibility of building that out, and then they develop it, and then they share it with the entire team. So if you ever get a chance, watch the TED Talk about how to make toast, because you'll learn that everybody processes information differently and shares with other people like a different methodology to get from point A to point B. So the idea is you want to define how that department wants to make the toast, for their specific department. And then they share that with everybody. Then everybody's on the same page. So now we have the lines we drive between how to get from point A to point B, how we're going to get there. Then we have the strategic plan of like, what are we going to actually do to grow? And then we have the review and the preparation for the next season. So it's very strategic process that's in different phases, but it helps.
How do you go about selecting like a vision? So, for example, like what's next for the herd, and how did you come up with that?
Right. So we basically take our parent club's mantra. We want to be the best sports and entertainment venue in the world. And we're here in Oshkosh, but we're a minor league team, but we're a major league team as well because we're paying our players. But, our vision is to continue to grow. Like we want to, we had 11 sellouts. So how do we get to 12? How do we get to 13? How do we get to 24? 100%. So that's the sellout vertical. Like how do we grow that? Game day experience. Okay, we had 6 bobbleheads, 8 bobbleheads, or not bobbleheads, 6 theme nights, thematic jerseys. So how do we grow that to get to more thematic jersey nights? We won promotion of the year for a Black History Month, a celebration called Be the Light. And that activation got us national notoriety on TNT, inside the NBA on TNT. Kenny Smith rocked some jerseys shared with Shaq and Charles and Ernie. I got 3 minutes and 20 seconds on national TV, blew up on Instagram, 7.1 million viewers. If you look up YouTube, the YouTube view alone is like 89,000 views. So like huge platform, right? So how do we get this bigger and better, right? So, okay, who are we going to celebrate next year? What are we going to do to kick it off? And we're already in the process of that. So like we took the activation we did. We're working on creating a documentary. We've filmed everything. We're working on getting the rights. We're working with some people in Hollywood to try to button it up and sell it. But the vision is that documentary, let's release it going into next year's Black History Month. So then that has this huge like amplification of what we did last year, celebrates the award we won, but then actually rolls into the next season or the next, I guess, Black History Month activation. And we're already actively working on who we're going to celebrate. So we've got some really cool names. We got 2 of them lined up. I'm not going to release them, but it's awesome. So we're always talking internally. We're dreaming big. We want to be the Milwaukee Bucks, but we only have 12 to 13 full-time staff. The Bucks have over 200. So we're trying to do the best with the limited resources we have, but the amazing talent and amazing minds we have in our office.
I think it's really interesting. You're taking small successes or relatively, and you're doubling down on them, and that seems to be a pattern of your vision. Is that a lot of things that worked before? Now, when you're trying to figure out what is going to work, how do you process that? Because there's a million directions we could try.
Right.
And it sounds like you've tried several different things. You found a couple of them that work, and now we're doubling down on those for next year. But how do you test out stuff? How do you figure out not to waste resources on something that's going nowhere?
Right. We're very strategic in regards to assessing the opportunities. So my staff would laugh because I always say, show me the P&L. Let me see the pro forma. So they come to me with ideas. So they're like, hey, what about this? What about that? It's not fully flushed out. So then I'm like, okay, well, what are the expenses? What's the upside? What's the revenue? How are we driving ticket sales? How are we getting butts and seats? How are we going to drive sponsorship revenue? So we assess the big picture. So ideas are great. And a guy that I used to work for used to always say ideas are easy. And they are. Like anybody can come up with any idea. But it's how do you make them work? Like what resources do you have? Do they drive revenue? Do they help us accomplish our goals? So we build out the P&L. An example is our PR coordinator helped drive the bus on a 5K, first ever 5K for us. And we did a lot of research. We talked to the Houston Rockets, which was one of the first NBA teams to do a 5K. We talked to a buddy of mine that runs the Houston Marathon, like actually facilitates the marathon, and just assessed everything. And so then we figured out, okay, how can we make this successful? So we created a full-on P&L based on research with local vendors, based on the advice from the people we were talking with, based on the costs from the city. And then we said, okay, let's test it out. Let's try it. And we ended up having a very, very successful first 5K. We had close to 200 people, which is unheard of when you launch a 5K. And so the goal is to make that an annual legacy event. So it's literally assessing, like, does it make sense from a metric standpoint? And then the upside, and then let's test it, roll the dice, and then let's keep growing it. But let's stick with it. Like, we may have lost a little bit of money in year 1, but we know in year 5, it's gonna crush it.
So you'll forecast this over several years of trying it?
Absolutely.
Most of the time?
Yes, sir.
And then you're kind of, I think that's a great way of keeping ideas in check. And that's great advice. Ideas are cheap and they're easy. And it's about applying an actual pro forma to that.
Right.
To figure it out. And I think our bankers in the audience will appreciate that a little bit. Right, Tom? No, so tell me a little bit about just from a personal development standpoint. What do you kind of find as success habits, and what do you find works well for the successful people in your organization?
Right. I would say for successful habits, again, I go back to the mindset, but it's not a job, but you want a career, right? And I told the story the other day is, for me personally, I stuck out where I was at in Idaho for 15 years because I always told myself when I stop learning, I'll move on. And I would trick myself like, oh, we get to host the NBA preseason game. Oh, we're going to host the showcase. So I kept tricking myself into like growing. So for me, my success is based on my growth of knowledge. Like I'm a hungry, like I'm a nerd. I like to know things. I like to understand things. So I always want to develop from that standpoint. So that's what keeps me ticking. You know, it's not so much how much I get paid. It's not so much this award or that. It's more of like, I just want to continually grow and develop my skill sets in my career path for my resume, right? So, but one of the rewarding pieces is, back to the human engineering piece, is being able to work with the team I have and get them to where they want to go. So like helping develop them and help them grow to where they want to go. So, you know, the success, you know, everybody has a different mindset of success. You know, like new account executives that come in that are straight out of college, maybe their idea of success isn't the American dream. Maybe it's having more time off. Maybe it's being able to travel more, you know, be able to go see things and do things. Whereas like for me, I want a house, I want a family, I want kids, I want a dog, you know, I want stability where you have other people that have different ideas of success. So that's the biggest challenge, is trying to juggle all of that while you're developing your team and developing your staff and trying to achieve your goals.
I think that's an interesting way to put it, because if you can understand everyone's angle, everyone's kind of what makes them tick, it becomes a lot easier to kind of motivate a team. It becomes a lot easier to help coach and develop that in a lot of ways. You know, we've been involved together on a couple different strategic initiatives for the greater Oshkosh community, like Oshkosh Chamber of Commerce strategic planning and things like that. After being here for, you know, a couple years now and having been other places, what do you see would be a great thing for Oshkosh? Where should Oshkosh go as a community, and how the herd might interact with that?
Right. I think one of the best things Oshkosh has going for it are the people here. Amazing mindset, amazing brain trust, awesome personalities. I think there's just a lot of opportunity for Oshkosh to continue to grow. You just see some of the growth that's happening, and it's really inspiring, exciting. You know, obviously the arena being right here in downtown is really nice, and you see the things that are on the horizon in and around that space. You know, as that space continues to build up and grow out, I think that's going to be a really nice addition or opportunity for the city. So I think the city fathers, you know, the chamber, like people they're doing the right things, and it's just a matter of time. Things don't happen overnight. Yeah. But I'm excited to see where it goes, because we have a really solid group of people leading the charge, and there's really neat things on the horizon. So
talking about the Sawdust District, where we have the arena, what do you think would be great for the herd as far as development opportunities in that area?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, not even just there, just for the city of Oshkosh, is the more things for people to do pre and post game. Okay. Is huge. So the more restaurants you have, the more breweries you have, the more retail. It just depends on, you know, like it's experiential. So like you want to create the herd is a destination. Like it's 24 games at home. but can you add more destination experiences for those people that come in and have such a good time at the herd? Like, what other opportunities are there? So then word of mouth spreads, not just about us, not just about the arena and the herd, but like the city of Oshkosh, how great it is. Like, oh, it's cool. They got this, they got that. So if you can create that testimony, those testimonials of word of mouth through the experiences, we have an amazing amount of them. Like, and they're kind of hidden. Like when I first rolled into Oshkosh, I was so impressed with the restaurants, and I just didn't realize they were there. You roll in. I think when I first started, it was March, very gloomy. Not the greatest of weather, and started bouncing around. I was like, wow, this city's awesome. There's a lot that it offers. So I think it's telling that story too. Creating more of a destination beyond just Oshkosh.
Yeah. What have you noticed in the sports industry? If I go too specific, but in those kinds of districts that work well, and I'll add a second part to that in the winter. What can we do in the winter to make things lively and kind of create this sports environment? We see things like at Titletown Tech District with Lambeau Field. They've come up with creative ideas, but I'm just kind of curious of other things that you've seen or thought of.
Yeah, I mean, you can not saying that Oshkosh needs to do this, but if you look at the different markets across the NBA family, you have the Jurassic Park, you have the Deer District, like you have destination places that are surrounded with entertainment options, drinking options, food options. So again, like it's cold out, and our fans are amazing because they brave the craziest storms ever to come to our games. But if you create more opportunities for them to have fun before our games and then post games, and I think that's where it could grow.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do have some time for questions, for a little Q&A from folks in the audience. We always try to save some time, and I know that there are some sports nuts out here that might have some specific questions on the team and the performance of the year and things like that. So we would like to open it up to any thoughts or questions for Steve.
So you guys just won Franchise of the Year, which is super exciting. But what is kind of the criteria that they use to vote on that?
Yeah, great question. So the league actually for Franchise of the Year basically has thresholds in each vertical of the business. So that's ticket sales, sellouts, sponsorship revenue, impact in the community, just a lot of different, numbers associated with that. So like, how many sellouts you have, what's your increase of social media year over year. So they assess that from a quantifiable standpoint, and that basically gets you a seat at the table, as you will, to be assessed by a committee of NBA, WNBA, and G League executives. And then they determine, like, okay, this is the Franchise of the Year. They did the best with year over year increases across all those verticals. Every time I talk about it, it's the equivalent of winning an NBA championship but in the business space. So super proud for our team, like our front office staff, our business staff, and honestly, like the community itself. Like, we don't do that without the sponsors we had. We don't do it without the season ticket support we have. Frankly, we don't do it without everybody in this room, that's come to a game, that support us, that talked about us, that covered us in the media. Like, we can't do those things. And one of the coolest things about that is, Franchise of the Year is awesome. But if you really peel back the layers of the onion, like we talked about, and like dig deeper, is the impact we've had in the community doing our activations. Like we donated close to $93,000, $94,000 worth of in-kind actual cash to different causes across the Fox Valley. So being able to leverage the power of the athlete and sport and to give back is probably actually, for me, the coolest thing. And we can't do that. We can't win FOI without the people in this valley. So great question.
What can we do as a community to make the players feel welcome? Because we're always thinking about recruiting and retaining the best talent here as well.
No, that's a great question. So it's just being welcoming. I'm not saying everybody has to do this, but one of my buddies is a doctor in town, and if he ever catches the team out, he buys them a meal. And I'm not saying you have to do that. It's just, that's a very nice thing that makes them feel welcome. A lot of these young men are from all over the country, from different backgrounds, from different lifestyles, and just saying hi, just being welcoming, waving to them, saying, being genuine with them, making them feel comfortable, making them feel welcome is probably the biggest thing. And to be very transparent, like I've seen a lot of different markets, and this market is exceptional at doing that already. So like our fan base is phenomenal, like in arena. You have fans that go out of their way to like bring cookies or they'll crochet stuff. Like it's so cool to see what our fans do. So having that mentality of just like making them feel that they are Oshkosh and that they are part of the Fox Valley is huge.
Hey, Steve, just a quick question on the roster and how the G League treats that. It seems to be more open where other teams are plucking our good players, and how do your rights per player work in the G League?
Are you trying to try out?
What I want you to do is get that Mac McClung guy
Tom
so we
still
can have a
got
dunk contest every halftime.
So yeah, the player acquisition. So yes, you'll probably see the league evolve. We have basically one new team coming to the league, the Portland Trail Blazers. They were announced for next year. You'll eventually see Phoenix come into the league within a year or two, most likely, based on reports that have hit the wire. So you're going to eventually see that 1-to-1 affiliation. The theory out there is once you get to that, you might have more of a true AAA where they actually control the rosters and teams can't pluck the talent you're developing, because it might just be, okay, these are my assets and I'm developing them primarily for Milwaukee. But you're right. Like right now, other teams can poach. And we've seen that. Like there's amazing success stories. Christian Wood is making buku dollars playing for other teams, but he came up through Milwaukee and for us. How the players are acquired, it's a mixture of different ways. So returning rights players are players that we have the rights for that have played for us last year. The draft will happen end of October, and we'll pick a couple people through the rounds, and they have the opportunity to play for us. The one that you're interested in is the local player tryouts, so you could sign up to try out. And there's affiliate players, so there's players that actually come on board through the Bucks training camp with the understanding that they'll be waived, but they'll be assigned to us. They'll come play for us. So there's quite a few ways. Then there's injuries, that rehab players, and two ways. If you've been watching the collective bargaining agreement conversation, the number of two ways will probably jump up to 3, I believe. So that's really exciting because now you have 3 two ways, an additional person on roster. Our business staff, we haven't talked about it yet, but it has a lot of implications tied to like higher expenses and other things we got to be prepared for. But being able to put together a roster that has high-level NBA talent is awesome. And hopefully we'll get to the point one day where we're just primarily developing people for Milwaukee.
All right, I guess I got one question. What is the hardest challenge you faced as a whole for the organization this year?
This year, I would say it's human engineering. So the whole conversation we've had since, it's the most rewarding, but it's the most challenging. So, coming out of the gate, we were a couple staff down, and we had to get creative on backfilling. We had to get creative on how do we drive revenues for the lack of the persons on staff. And then we eventually got staffed up, and then to the point of everybody has different thoughts of what success is. They have different agendas, different reasons. That's the biggest challenge. And then, even during during the games, not having a full staff to operate the games as well. So like we're just a tenant at the arena. But the arena had challenges with filling, different positions. So then that put pressure on us because we still want to have the highest level experience possible. So how do we help? So like at one point, there was, I can't remember the reason why, I think it was a weather situation or something, where our staff stepped in and started selling different sodas and things just to make sure that experience is still at a high level for our fan base. So human engineering is probably the hardest thing that we'll always face, but it's also the most rewarding because that's why we're here. We're here to develop people and get them to the next level. And it's so fun. Like we had a guy, actually 2 people the last year get called up to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So that's so awesome to see them get their cup of coffee and they're still drinking it at the NBA level. So
I got a question about kind of the NBA in general. Just having been around the industry for a while, what issues or shortcomings have you noticed with the organization as a whole, and what would you do to, if you could wave a magic wand to kind of fix some of those?
Yeah, I don't think there's any issues. You know, we have a very strong leadership team at the NBA level. Adam Silver, Mark Tatum do a phenomenal job at guiding the ship to the right direction and the growth of the NBA. And you just see that with the product that's put out there. So it's really like we're very fortunate as a league to be one of the strongest leagues out there. You know, the NBA G League. The NBA G League itself also has a very strong leadership team, guided by Sharif Abdur-Rahim and Jeff Brown and Portia Archer and some amazing talent at that level that continue to take our league to the next level. So I don't necessarily think there's issues. It's just there's always opportunities for our teams individually in our own markets. So like, you know, I wish every team would sell out every game. I wish we would sell out every game. So that's the opportunity for all the teams is like, how do we as individually teams, how do we put butts in seats? Like, how do we continue to grow the fan base locally? That helps then the teams across the league grow holistically from a broadcast standpoint. You know, nobody likes to drink at an empty bar, right?
Yeah.
We're in Wisconsin. There's a lot of drinking. But anyways, so that's our goal is like, how do we figure that out? So I don't think there's shortcomings. I think it's just a lot of opportunities, and it starts at the ground level, and it starts with me in my seat. So if you've ever read the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willenick,
yep.
it starts with me. If I can't do certain things, if I'm not communicating, then it's my fault. So we're not growing, it's my fault. If we're stuck at 11, if we go down to 2 sellouts, it's on me. So there's nothing about the league itself. It's on me. It's on the person that's leading this group.
What goes into, so when 6 or 7 years ago, there was like rumors and speculations that if Milwaukee didn't build the Deer District, it was going to go somewhere else. The franchise would be sold. And there was also discussion around if the herd was going to be here or somewhere else. What goes into selecting some of these locations for the G League franchise affiliates?
Right. So most teams, NBA wise, like for us, the way we, I guess the way Oshkosh won the herd is there's an RFP process. So they go to RFP and they throw it out there, and then cities have a certain deadline or entities have a certain deadline to turn in their submission. So one of the parts of my story that I didn't share is before I got the job here, in between Idaho and here, I worked for a buddy of mine as a consultant out of Sheboygan. So don't be mad at me. But I helped build the business plan or the proposal, the RFP response to Milwaukee to try to bring the G League team to Milwaukee. Or from Milwaukee,
Sheboygan.
sorry, to Sheboygan. So that part of that process is the team will say, here's all the metrics and thresholds, here's all the things, the requirements that you need to meet. And then you, as the person submitting the response for it, need to paint the picture with data, with imagery, with vision, with plan. And then the leadership of, at this time, the leadership of Milwaukee then assessed all the different markets, and I can't remember them all. But they're gonna make a decision based on what's the best fit for Milwaukee, and Oshkosh is the perfect spot because we are hour 20. If you have a lead foot, like some of our staff, maybe an hour, but from Milwaukee, so it's nice from players. But we're far enough north that we can actually help expand their brand and their footprint, and create a radius of penetration for marketing that helps tell the statewide story of who the Bucks are, but also the herd. And so very smart on that group that chose us, which was a combination of their management team, Peter Fagan, their ownership at the time, Alex Lazary. Very, very smart people on picking the city of Oshkosh and Oshkosh Arena.
Sure. Yeah, great information, Steve. Thanks. So from a community perspective, what are one or two things that are really positive and kind of really help the herd, be in Oshkosh? And if there were one or two opportunities we have as a community to help improve and to help you guys stay successful, what would that be also from the community's perspective?
Right. So I think you could almost classify them as the same thing. So one is we have one of the best, if not the best, fan base in the whole league. And you talk, herd up. You talk to anybody within the league that has traveled, coaching staff, operational, business, they're going to tell you that we have the best fans. Like, we come out, we support we're welcoming. Like it's just a great experience in our fan base. Again, back to the comment earlier I made of the people here are like salt of the earth. Like we are great. You all are great people here. But what the community could do differently or better is increasing that support. And we don't exist without season ticket holders. We don't exist without people that commit to a season ticket membership, which is an investment for 24 games, and they support us. They may not use all the games, but they hand them off. They use them for different benefits. They provide them to disadvantaged populations that may not be able to order or buy them. So that season ticket base is basically our lifeblood of how we exist. And then the other component is corporate partnership, like the sponsorship piece. Like we need corporations that are in our market, that are a surrounding market to support us. Like we need that responsible corporate citizen to invest in who we are so we can invest in improving the quality of life, providing more assets to their corporations to recruit people, to retain people. So like it's a synergistic relationship. And it really comes down to having that support. And then even on the community side, like we have some amazing activations. So it would be really, really nice to have even more rapport and relationships with that different community activations or platforms or 501c3s. The more we can give back, the better. So great question.
Yeah. Thanks, Rob. Do you have any other questions here for Steve today? Where do you want to be in 5 years for the record?
I always, everybody asks me that. I always say world domination. So like I want to be the best. Like I want to do the best. And so like my goal is like to be here long term, because this is an amazing community, very fortunate, very blessed to raise my kids here. They're young, so I want to see them grow and be a part of the community. So would be awesome to be here and then sitting here telling you, oh, we had 24 sellouts. We gave back $200,000, like having that story just continue to grow. So that's my goal is the long term is to continue to build.
I was just curious, in addition to coaching players on their technical skills, do you do leadership development? Because I'm sure it's a transition to become a player and move to a new community, et cetera.
Right. It's a really good question. So yes, the league itself is all about development. So there's a group of meetings called TAM meetings, so team awareness meetings. So they have topics from sex ed to financial investment to life after sport. And they have these mandatory meetings and the teams have to participate. And the league works with experts in those spaces to come out and train these young men on how to like not lose their money, like how to develop, how to be successful when basketball is no longer their calling. So that's one piece of the pie. Team Ignite, which is another little piece of our league, is a team of young people that forego college and they come in and they play on a team that's peppered with veterans. So the strategy there is you have veteran leadership that trains them and develops them how to handle life in the league, how to rest your legs, take care of your body. But it's also they have an opportunity for those kids, like once they're done, like if they get injured at Team Ignite or if they go to the NBA and get injured, they have the ability to go back to school and get a college degree. So the league has worked in some of that as well. So the NBA G League is very conscious at making sure that these young men are set up for success, not just in the short term during their basketball career, but in the long term from after they're done. Yeah, I think the youngest, and I'm going to screw this up, but I think the youngest kid on that team was 18, Scoot Henderson, I believe. Came out of high school. I think he skipped his senior year maybe, and came in there, and he's going to be a top pick, high-level player, really good. So it's interesting because the collective bargaining agreement, it'll be interesting to see how things develop long-term. In the next round, but it's a great way for young kids to get experience and I guess have a pretty quick trajectory into the NBA. Jalen Green was first round pick. I think he was number 2 overall a couple of years ago, rocking it for the Houston Rockets, doing really well. So he came through Team Ignite. So it's definitely a cool feeder system.
Steve, thank you so much for this
you.
opportunity to speak with you today.
Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Heard up.
Hold up.
Yeah.